More than a promise. It was a profound personal commitment which defined her whole life. She made sacrifices for duty. Her dedication and devotion as sovereign.
The royal family just broke their silence, and what they revealed about Prince William will leave you speechless. For weeks, whispers circled the palace while strange absences raised alarm bells. Now, the devastating truth is finally out, and it's far worse than anyone imagined. What happened behind those golden gates has shaken the monarchy to its core.
Enormous positive difference this charity has made to bereaved families across the country. We celebrate the love, support, and skill provided by the charity's staff, volunteers, and supporters.
The future king is fighting a battle that no crown can protect him from. The morning air felt heavy across the English countryside as dawn broke over Windsor. It was the kind of quiet that settles in before something changes, before news travels, and the world starts to react. Inside the ancient walls of Windsor Castle, staff members moved through their routines with a strange sense of unease. Something was different, though no one could quite put their finger on what it was. The castle had stood for nearly 1,000 years, witnessing countless moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy. Its stone walls had absorbed the echoes of royal births and deaths, celebrations and mournings. But this particular mourning carried a weight that even the most seasoned members of the household could feel. Conversations happened in hushed tones. Footsteps seemed quieter than usual. Even the usual bustle of preparing for the day ahead felt muted, as though everyone was moving carefully around something fragile. Outside the main gates, a small group of reporters had gathered earlier than normal. They stood in clusters, cameras ready, notepads in hand, breathing visible puffs into the cold air. These were professionals who had spent years covering royal events, people who knew how to read the signs. And the signs this morning suggested something was coming. There had been no official announcements, no press releases, but certain absences speak louder than words. Prince William had not been seen in public for several days, and in the world of royal watching, even a brief disappearance raises questions. The last time the Prince of Wales had appeared before cameras was at a charity event in central London. Those who attended remembered it clearly. William had arrived on time, dressed impeccably as always, ready to deliver remarks about a cause close to his heart. But something had seemed off. His usual warmth was there, but it appeared to require effort. His smile, while present, did not quite reach his eyes. Midway through his speech, he paused, pressed his fingers to his forehead, and stepped back from the microphone. A moment later, with a quiet apology to the audience, he had left the stage. The palace had released a brief statement later that day, explaining that the prince was feeling unwell and needed rest. Such statements are common enough. Members of the royal family are human after all, subject to the same ailments as anyone else. A stomach bug, a headache, exhaustion from a packed schedule. These things happen. But as the days passed with no further appearances and no updates, the initial explanation began to feel insufficient. People started to wonder. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had been spotted leaving Windsor Castle early one morning, her expression serious, her movements quick. She had climbed into a waiting car without acknowledging the small crowd that had formed. No wave, no smile, none of the grace and composure she typically showed in public. The door had closed behind her, and the vehicle pulled away, disappearing down the long drive and into the mist that hung over the grounds. Inside the castle, the Wales children had been kept home from school. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and young Prince Louis were used to a certain routine, a balance between royal life and normal childhood activities. School was part of that normalcy, a place where they could be students rather than princes and princesses. When that routine was disrupted, it meant something significant was happening. The royal nanny had done her best to keep them occupied and calm, but children have a way of sensing when adults are worried. They asked questions that were difficult to answer without causing alarm. King Charles had arrived at Windsor from London, his schedule suddenly cleared of official engagements. For a monarch who took his duties seriously, who had spent his entire life preparing for and then fulfilling the role of king, to step back from public commitments suggested urgency. He moved through the castle with purpose, his face drawn, his usual measured pace replaced by something closer to haste. The staff noticed everything. They always did. Years of service had taught them to read the mood of the household, to understand what was needed without being told. Now they saw worry etched into familiar faces. They heard phone calls being made behind closed doors, voices kept low but urgent. They watched as members of the family gathered, as plans were rearranged, as the machinery of royal life shifted into a different mode entirely. Queen Camilla sat in one of the castle's private rooms, a cup of tea growing cold on the table beside her. She stared out the window at the gardens below, their autumn colors muted under gray skies. Her husband sat across from her, and between them stretched a silence filled with unspoken concerns. They had both lived long enough to know that life does not always follow the plan, that even the most carefully constructed schedules and duties can be upended by circumstances beyond anyone's control. The question on everyone's mind was simple but impossible to answer with certainty. What was happening with Prince William? The lack of information created a vacuum that worry rushed to fill. In the absence of facts, people imagined scenarios, each one feeding the growing sense that this was more than a simple illness. The prince was young, healthy, active. He had responsibilities, 3 young children who needed him, a nation that looked to him as the future of the monarchy. For him to vanish from public view, for the palace to remain so carefully silent, suggested something serious. By late morning, word had begun to spread beyond the immediate circle of family and staff. Certain officials had been contacted, trusted advisors brought into confidence, arrangements made that hinted at the gravity of the situation. Still, no public statement had been issued. The palace communications team worked carefully, weighing every word, understanding that once information was released, it could not be taken back. They had to balance the public's right to know against the family's need for privacy, and had to provide enough information to calm speculation without revealing more than was appropriate. The media presence outside the gates grew steadily throughout the day. More cameras arrived, more reporters took up positions, all of them waiting for something to happen. News organizations began to run stories noting the prince's absence, the unusual gathering of family members at Windsor, the cleared schedules and canceled appearances. They were careful in their wording, avoiding speculation, while acknowledging the obvious questions. The British press, often aggressive in pursuit of royal stories, showed unusual restraint. Perhaps they sensed that this situation called for a different approach, that whatever was unfolding deserved to be handled with care. Inside Windsor Castle, Catherine moved through the corridors with quiet determination. She had always been a stabilizing presence, someone who understood both the weight of royal duty and the importance of family. Now those 2 aspects of her life were pulling in the same direction. She checked on her children, spoke with staff, conferred with the king, all while carrying her own private worry. The bond between her and William had always been evident to those who knew them. They were partners in every sense, facing the demands of royal life together, supporting each other through challenges both public and private. Now she faced the possibility of a challenge, unlike any they had encountered before. As afternoon faded toward evening, the castle took on a different character. Lights came on in windows, warm glows against the darkening sky. The reporters outside huddled together for warmth, some drinking coffee from thermoses, others pacing to keep their blood moving. They knew that statements from the palace often came in the late afternoon or early evening. They waited. At precisely 4 o'clock, a figure emerged from the castle, the royal spokesperson, a person whose face had become familiar from countless press briefings over the years, stepped forward to address the assembled media. The crowd fell silent, cameras focused, recording devices were checked one last time. The statement was brief, just a few sentences, carefully chosen, revealing almost nothing while confirming that something significant was indeed happening. The royal family, the spokesperson said, requested privacy as they dealt with a personal matter involving the Prince of Wales. That was all. No details about the nature of the matter, no timeline for when more information might be available, just a request for privacy and understanding. The words hung in the air as the spokesperson turned and walked back into the castle. The journalists looked at each other, processing what they had heard and, more importantly, what they had not heard. A personal matter involving the Prince of Wales. The phrasing was deliberate, professional, and deeply concerning precisely because of what it did not say. As darkness settled over Windsor, the castle remained lit from within, its ancient stones holding whatever secrets unfolded inside. The gathered press began filing their stories, their reports careful and measured, acknowledging the statement while noting its lack of specifics. Across the country and around the world, people who followed the royal family began to hear the news. On social media, speculation began immediately, theories proposed and debated, concern expressed in thousands of messages. But inside the castle, away from cameras and questions and the endless appetite for information, a family dealt with their private reality. Whatever was happening with Prince William, whatever circumstances had brought them all together with such urgency, remained known only to those directly involved. The rest of the world could only wait, hope, and wonder what the morning might bring. The evening had settled into a deeper darkness by the time Prince Harry's plane touched down at Heathrow. He had been in California when the call came, living the life he and Meghan had built far from the protocols and pressures of royal duties. The decision to leave Britain had not been easy, and the years since had been filled with complicated feelings, public statements, and a distance that felt both geographical and emotional. But when the message arrived, when he heard the careful words that told him something was seriously wrong with his brother, none of that mattered anymore. The flight across the Atlantic had given him hours to think, to remember, to worry. He and William had been close once, inseparable in childhood, bonded by shared loss and the unique pressure of growing up royal. They had drifted apart in recent years, their paths diverging in ways that sometimes felt irreparable. There had been disagreements, hurt feelings, things said in interviews and books that could not be unsaid. But beneath all of that remained something fundamental, a connection forged in the years when they only had each other to truly understand what their lives were like. A car was waiting for him at the airport, arranged quietly to avoid the attention that usually followed his visits to Britain. He climbed in, exhausted from travel, but too anxious to feel it fully. The driver knew the route to Windsor without needing to be told. As they moved through the dark countryside, Harry looked out at the passing landscape, familiar and foreign at the same time. He had grown up in this country, knew these roads, had memories attached to places they passed. Yet returning always felt strange now, like visiting somewhere that used to be home but was not quite anymore. At Windsor, he was shown in through a private entrance, away from the reporters who still maintained their watch outside the main gates. A member of staff, someone who had known him since childhood, greeted him with a quiet nod and led him through corridors he remembered walking as a boy. The castle at night always had a particular quality, its age and history seeming more present somehow, in the dim light and long shadows. King Charles was still awake, sitting in one of the private rooms, papers spread before him but clearly untouched. He looked up when Harry entered, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The relationship between father and son had been strained, complicated by Harry's departure from royal life and the public nature of his criticisms. But now, facing something that put all of that into perspective, the tension seemed to dissolve. Charles rose and embraced his younger son, a gesture that said more than words could. They sat together, and Charles explained what he knew. William had collapsed several days earlier, suddenly and without warning. He had been rushed to a private hospital where doctors were working to understand what had happened. The initial tests had raised more questions than answers. There were concerns, serious ones, though the full picture remained unclear. Catherine had barely left his side. The children were being shielded as much as possible, told only that their father was unwell and receiving the best care available. Harry listened, his face growing more drawn with each detail. He asked questions that Charles could not fully answer. The medical situation was complex, evolving, not easily summarized. What was clear was that William was in danger, that the family had come together because the situation demanded it, because uncertainty had replaced the usual rhythms of royal life with something far more frightening. Queen Camilla joined them after a while, her presence adding a steadying influence. She had always approached her role with careful consideration, aware of the complications of being a stepmother to grown men with strong feelings about their late mother. Now she simply offered what comfort she could, a hand on Charles's shoulder, a sympathetic look toward Harry. This was not a time for old wounds or complicated histories. It was a time for family. The hours passed slowly. Updates from the hospital came in intervals, medical reports that required translation from clinical language into terms that made sense to anxious relatives. Catherine called at one point, her voice tired but determined. She spoke with Charles first, then asked to talk to Harry. The conversation was brief, but the simple fact of it felt significant. Whatever distance had grown between them over the years, she wanted him to know he was welcome, that his presence mattered. Prince William's closest friends had been notified as well, people who had known him for decades, who had been there through various phases of his life. Some came to Windsor, sitting with the family in quiet solidarity. Others sent messages, offers of support, expressions of concern. The network of relationships that surrounded the future king, built over 40 years of life, activated itself in response to the crisis. People wanted to help, even when there was little they could actually do beyond being present and available. The staff at Windsor moved through their duties with subdued efficiency. They brought food that was barely touched, kept fires burning in the rooms where the family gathered, answered phones, and managed the logistics that continued even in the midst of personal turmoil. Some of them had served the royal family for decades. They had seen previous crises, knew how to maintain discretion while providing support. Their presence was part of what allowed the family to focus on what mattered most. As the night wore on, Charles found himself thinking about his own mother, Queen Elizabeth, and how she had handled moments of family difficulty with a combination of strength and privacy. She had understood the balance between public duty and personal feeling, and had navigated countless situations where the two intersected. He wished he could ask her advice now, and could hear her perspective on how to manage what was happening. But she was gone, and he was the one who had to make the decisions, to guide the family through uncertainty. Harry sat alone for a while in one of the castle's libraries, surrounded by shelves of books that chronicled centuries of history. He thought about his brother, about the years they had shared and the years they had lost. There were things he wished he had said differently, moments he would change if he could. But regret was a luxury for easier times. Right now, all that mattered was that William recovered, that he had the chance to be there for his children, to fulfill the role he had been preparing for his entire life. The distance between Windsor and the hospital felt both small and vast. It was less than an hour's drive, a journey that could be made quickly if needed. Yet the separation meant that the family at Windsor existed in a state of waiting, dependent on phone calls and messages for information, unable to see for themselves what was happening. Catherine had made it clear that she did not want everyone crowding into the hospital, that William needed quiet and space. So they waited, respecting her wishes while feeling the strain of being apart. In the early hours of the morning, when the castle was at its quietest, Charles walked through the halls, unable to sleep. He passed portraits of previous monarchs, men and women who had carried the weight of the crown through their own challenges and crises. The continuity of the monarchy was something he had always taken seriously, the sense of being part of a chain stretching back through generations. Now that chain felt fragile, threatened by circumstances that medical science was still working to understand. He found himself in the room where his mother had spent so much time, a space that still carried traces of her presence. He sat in her chair, looking out at the ground she had loved, and allowed himself a moment of vulnerability that he could not show to others. The responsibility of being king had always been something he anticipated, prepared for, took seriously. But the responsibility of being a father facing the possible loss of a child was something else entirely, something that no amount of preparation could make easier. Dawn came slowly, gray light gradually replacing darkness. The family gathered again, drawn together by the new day and the hope that it might bring better news. Breakfast was laid out but largely ignored. Coffee was consumed in large quantities. The television remained off, as if watching news coverage of their own situation would somehow make it more real, more difficult to bear. A call came from Catherine just after 7. The room fell silent as Charles answered, everyone watching his face for clues about what he was hearing. His expression was difficult to read, a mixture of relief and continued concern. When he hung up, he shared what he had learned. William had made it through the night. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about certain indicators, though they stressed that the situation remained serious. More tests were being conducted. Catherine would call again when she had more information. It was not the news they had hoped for, but it was not the worst news either. In the strange calculus of crisis, that qualified as something to hold on to. The day stretched ahead, another period of waiting, of hoping, of trying to maintain some semblance of normal function, while nothing felt normal at all. Outside, the world continued its usual patterns. People going to work, children going to school, life proceeding as it always did. Inside Windsor Castle, time moved differently, marked not by the clock, but by phone calls and updates, by the slow accumulation of information that might eventually reveal whether the future would look anything like they had imagined. The hospital corridor stretched long and empty in the fluorescent light, its polished floors reflecting the overhead fixtures in a way that made everything seem stark and cold. Catherine sat in a private waiting room, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. She had been here for days now, leaving only briefly to check on the children before returning. The staff had offered her a proper room to rest in, but she refused to go far from where William lay. The medical team had been careful with their explanations, using precise language that somehow made things both clearer and more frightening. William's condition was serious but stable, they said. He was receiving the best possible care. They were monitoring him constantly, adjusting treatments as needed, doing everything that modern medicine could offer. But beneath the professional reassurance, Catherine heard what they were not quite saying. They did not know exactly what would happen next. They could not promise her the outcome she desperately needed to hear. Sleep came in brief, uncomfortable intervals, her body too tense to fully relax, even when exhaustion pulled at her. Every few hours, a nurse would come to update her, small pieces of information that she tried to assemble into a complete picture. His vital signs were holding steady. He had shown some response to certain stimuli. The swelling they were concerned about appeared to be stabilizing. She listened carefully to each word, searching for hope in the clinical details. The children called every evening before bed. Catherine stepped into the hallway for these conversations, trying to keep her voice steady and reassuring. They asked when Daddy would be home, whether he was getting better, if they could come visit him. She told them he was receiving excellent care, that the doctors were very good at their jobs, that everyone was doing everything possible to help him get well. She did not tell them how frightened she was, how the uncertainty sat in her chest like a weight that never lightened. King Charles arrived at the hospital on the 3rd day, his presence announced by a subtle increase in security and the quiet efficiency of staff preparing for a royal visit. He came through a private entrance, avoiding the main areas where other patients and their families moved through their own crises. Catherine stood when he entered the waiting room, and they embraced without speaking. Sometimes words were inadequate, and this was one of those times. They sat together for a while, the king and his daughter-in-law, united in their concern for the man who connected them. Charles asked questions about William's care, about the medical team's assessment, about what Catherine needed. She answered as best she could, though some questions had no good answers. What she needed was for William to wake up, to open his eyes and speak to her, to return to the life they had built together. Everything else felt secondary to that single desperate wish. The hospital room where William lay was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors, the occasional hiss of ventilation equipment, the ambient sound of machines doing the work his body struggled to do on its own. Catherine spent hours sitting beside his bed, holding his hand, talking to him even though he could not respond. She told him about the children, about small moments from their days, about nothing and everything. The nurses had said that patients sometimes could hear even when they appeared unconscious, that familiar voices might provide comfort or even encouragement to fight toward recovery. On the fourth night, Harry arrived at the hospital. Catherine had not expected him, had not known that Charles had reached out to bring him to Britain. When he appeared in the waiting room, she felt something shift inside her. Whatever complications existed in their relationship, whatever distance had grown between them over the years, seeing him there mattered. It meant William was not alone in this, that family was present despite everything else that had happened. Harry asked if he could see his brother. Catherine hesitated, not because she did not want him there, but because seeing William in his current state was difficult even for her, and she had been living with the reality for days. But she nodded and led him down the corridor to the private room where William remained in his uncertain state between presence and absence. The sight of his brother stopped Harry in the doorway. William had always been the healthy one, the active one, the person who seemed to move through life with physical confidence. Seeing him now, surrounded by medical equipment, his face pale against the white pillow, his body still in a way that felt wrong, was almost more than Harry could process. He moved slowly to the bedside, his earlier exhaustion from travel suddenly overwhelming him completely. Catherine gave them privacy, understanding that Harry needed time alone with his brother. She went to find coffee, though she did not really want it, just needed something to do with her hands, some small action that felt normal. In the hospital cafeteria, she sat at a corner table, surrounded by other people managing their own difficult situations. A woman cried quietly into her phone. A man stared at nothing, his coffee growing cold. An elderly couple held hands across the table, their faces etched with worry. Everyone here was fighting their own battle, carrying their own fear. When she returned, Harry was sitting beside William's bed, speaking in a low voice. She could not make out the words, but the tone was gentle, almost apologetic. She waited outside until he finished, giving him the time he needed. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red. They did not discuss what he had said. Some conversations were meant to be private, heard only by the person they were intended for, regardless of whether that person could consciously receive them. The vigil continued through another day and night. Charles came and went, managing royal duties that could not be entirely postponed while trying to be present for his son. Messages arrived from around the world, from other royal families, from heads of state, from people who knew William personally or simply felt moved by the news that the future king was seriously ill. The palace had finally released a brief statement acknowledging that the Prince of Wales was hospitalized and receiving treatment, though they provided no details beyond asking for privacy and prayers. Across Britain, people responded to the news in their own ways. Some gathered outside the hospital, leaving flowers and cards. Others lit candles in churches. Social media is filled with messages of support and concern. The nation, which had watched William grow up, which had seen him transform from a grieving child at his mother's funeral to a husband, father, and future monarch, collectively held its breath and hoped. In the quiet of the hospital room, Catherine maintained her watch. She read to William from books she thought he would enjoy. She played music she knew he liked. She described the view from the window, even though he could not see it. And she waited, because that was all she could do. waited for the moment when he might return to her, when the machines would register improvement, when the doctors would smile with genuine relief instead of careful optimism. The morning arrived differently than the ones before it. Catherine had dozed briefly in the chair beside William's bed, her hand still resting on his, when she felt something change. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but after days of watching for any sign, any indication of improvement, she had become attuned to the smallest shifts. His hand, which had been still for so long, moved slightly under hers. She sat up immediately, her heart suddenly pounding. For a moment, she wondered if she had imagined it, if exhaustion and desperate hope had created something that was not really there. But then it happened again. A faint pressure against her palm, deliberate and unmistakable. She pressed the call button for the nurse, her eyes never leaving William's face, watching for any other sign that he might be coming back to them. The medical team arrived quickly, their practiced efficiency a contrast to Catherine's barely contained emotion. They checked monitors, examined responses, spoke to each other in quiet professional tones, while she stood back, giving them room to work but unable to move far from the bed. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, the doctor turned to her with an expression she had not seen before. Cautious optimism real this time, not just the careful encouragement they had been offering for days. William was showing signs of consciousness. It was early yet, the doctor explained, and they needed to remain watchful. But the indicators were moving in the right direction. His brain activity had increased. He was responding to stimuli. These were significant developments, the kind they had been hoping to see. Catherine felt tears running down her face before she even realized she was crying, relief washing over her so powerfully that her legs felt weak. She called Charles first, her voice shaking as she delivered the news. She could hear the emotion in his response, the king allowing himself a moment of vulnerability before composing himself. He would come to the hospital immediately. She should call him if anything else changed. He was grateful, so grateful for this news. After they hung up, Catherine returned to William's bedside, taking his hand again, speaking softly to him, encouraging him to keep fighting, to come back to her and the children. Over the next hours, William's improvement continued in small increments. His eyes moved beneath closed lids. His breathing became more regular, less dependent on the machines. The doctors reduced some medications, allowing his body to take over functions it had been unable to manage before. Catherine watched it all, afraid to hope too much, but unable to stop herself from imagining what it would mean if he truly recovered. When his eyes finally opened, it was late afternoon. The room was quiet, just Catherine and a nurse who was checking one of the monitors. William's gaze was unfocused at first, confused, trying to make sense of where he was and what had happened. Catherine moved closer, speaking his name gently, letting him orient himself without overwhelming him. Recognition flickered across his face when he saw her, and though he could not speak yet, could not do much more than look at her. It was enough. He was there. He was aware. He had come back. The medical team was pleased but cautious. Recovery from what William had experienced would take time. There would be more tests, continued monitoring, rehabilitation to regain strength and function. But the critical danger appeared to have passed. They used words like remarkable and fortunate, acknowledging that the outcome could have been very different. Catherine barely heard the details. All that mattered was that William was awake, that he knew her, that the future they had feared losing was still possible. Charles arrived to find his son conscious for the first time in days. The moment between father and son was private, the king requesting a few minutes alone with William. When he emerged, his composure had cracks in it, evidence of emotion he rarely showed publicly. He squeezed Catherine's hand, told her that the family owed her an enormous debt for her steadfast presence, for never giving up, for maintaining faith when the situation seemed darkest. Harry came later that evening, his relief evident despite the complicated feelings that surely accompanied it. Whatever tensions existed between the brothers, whatever words had been said or left unsaid over the years, None of it seemed to matter in the face of William's recovery. They spoke briefly, William's voice still weak but growing stronger. And when Harry left the room, he looked lighter somehow, as though a weight he had been carrying had been lifted. The palace released a statement that evening, brief but filled with gratitude. The Prince of Wales was awake and recovering. The family thanked everyone for their prayers and support during what they described as a difficult time. Across the country and around the world, the news was met with celebration. Church bells rang in small villages and large cities. Messages of joy flooded social media. People who had been holding vigils outside the hospital embraced and cried with relief. Inside the hospital room, Catherine sat beside William as darkness fell outside the window. He was sleeping now, real sleep rather than unconsciousness, his body beginning the long process of healing. She watched him breathe, watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, and allowed herself to finally believe that they would get through this. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be recovery and adjustment, challenges to face and obstacles to overcome. But they would face them together, the way they always had, and that made everything else manageable. The morning would bring new beginnings, a return to life that had been paused in fear and uncertainty. But for now, in the quiet of the hospital room, with William resting peacefully beside her, Catherine simply sat in gratitude for the gift of more time, more moments, more of the life they had built and would continue building together.